Hey everybody, it's Adam Farkas. Welcome back to another edition of our Best Practices video series. And one of the interesting things that I've noticed about the best practices, if you look at all of the different practices and take a look at the pictures up on the screen right now, one commonality that you'll notice about them is their staff. And they uniformly have good staff members. This is not an accident. And one of the questions that people have asked me is, how do they do it? How do they, find these staff members? How do they train them? How do they retain them? I don't know, but I sure do know of an expert who can tell us today. So today we have one of the former Best Practices winners from 2018, Dr. Carrie Alfieri from McKinney, Texas, and Pinnacle Eye Associates. Let me tell you a little bit about Carrie before we get started. So she graduated cum laude from Texas A&M with a Bachelor of Science degree in Biomedical Science, and then went on to optometry school at the University of Houston and graduated magna cum laude from that institution. And along the way, she received specialized training in neurooptometry, pediatrics, ocular disease, and low vision. At Pinnacle, it looks like she practices full scope eye care, but we're going to get into that in a minute. Most importantly, though, you probably know her from her writing and her speaking. So since she entered practice, she's developed a nationwide reputation, both as a clinical and practice management expert. So I'm certain that you've seen her articles before in many different journals. And as I mentioned before, she's a best practice winner of 2018. So I can't think of a better person to talk to us today all about staffing. So Carrie, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
So why don't you start off just by telling us a little bit about your practice and what it's like?
My practice is in one of the fastest growing cities in the nation, and we have been growing very quickly for the last about 10 years. I am a single doctor practice at the moment, soon to be looking to hire a second doctor, and I have 11 staff members right now. We basically do full scope eye care. If you want it, then we've got it under our roof. We have been awarded the Small Business of the Year in McKinney in 2018. We've been nominated and won for Best Optometrist 13 years. And we actually won Best Ophthalmologist in 2018 in McKinney, which makes me giggle because, as you know, I'm not an ophthalmologist. But that just kind of speaks to the full scope of eye care that we provide here at Pinnacle Eye Associates.
That's fantastic. And one thing that you just mentioned, you have, you're a single doctor, but you have 11 staff members. So pretty big staff for a single doc.
It does seem like a lot, but we really actually do quite a bit of staff training as well as cross-training. But we are a fairly high-volume practice for even just a one-doctor practice.
Sure.
So I actually can't survive on any less.
Sure. And, 11 staff members in your office. I guess the first question that people would have is, where do you find people?
That's a tough question. There's lots of ways that I find people. I have a card that I keep with me that when I receive excellent service out and about, buying a pair of jeans, or I get excellent customer service at a restaurant, I'll hand it to the person who's been serving me and say, hey, if you've ever thought about a change in eye care or a change in career, if you'll give me a call. And so I've had people contact me that way. But in general, we have a pretty strenuous hiring process. We start with our core values. We developed a set of core values that really the team could buy into, and that way it really permeates throughout the entire practice. And then every decision that we make, whether it's hiring, dealing with an employee as far as evaluating, terminating, dealing with patients, they really reflect those core values. For instance, sometimes doing the right thing for a patient, sometimes it might actually cost the office a little bit of extra money, but it's actually the right thing to do. So if we hire those people properly in the first place, then they really can support our mission, which the ways that we can go about that are a few. One, we have a personality profile that we utilize for each applicant. In addition, we start with interview questions that support our core values. So our hiring process is multifold. First, they have to start with a phone interview, then with my operations manager. Then they move to an in-person interview with my operations manager. Then they move to a team interview with the entire team. So where they're shadowing, it's about a 2-hour interview where they're shadowing what we do in the office, chatting with the team, kind of seeing if they would be a good fit personality-wise. And then last, if they make it that far, they'll get to an interview with me.
So it sounds like this is highly thought out. This isn't something that you do ad hoc. Do you have this entire procedure written down so everyone understands the entire process?
I do. I'd be happy to share my interview questions. I've got a list here for you. And those are just that go over my core values. And I'll list those for you just so that you can understand a little bit more about where I'm coming from. So our first is excellence above all. We want to make sure that we're patient-focused and we have a passion for service. The second is to do the right thing. No matter what, do the right thing. So that applies to our integrity, what our character is, and how we have fun in the practice. A third is one team, one dream, which that means we are all working together. We do not want, we don't want anybody saying it's not my job. It's not my responsibility to do this. We are all on one team to grow together. The next one is grow with purpose. I like to affectionately call it grow or die, but our official fourth tenet is grow with purpose. And that's really what we want to do is we want to make sure that we grow on purpose. Otherwise, if you're not growing, then to me, your practice is not going to be sustainable. And then our last tenet is continuous improvement. So we always want to make sure that the practice is continuing to change and innovate and be actually ahead of the times compared to, just maintaining the status quo.
Right, and I wanted to hit on that last point for a second because it's very easy to get into a rut and do the same thing day after day after day. What do you do to keep your staff sort of on the cutting edge and, frankly, to keep you on the cutting edge when you're so busy every day just seeing patients?
Well, that's a great question, Adam. There are a lot of things that we do to keep the staff on cutting edge. I find it funny, a lot of doctors will ask and say, what if I train my staff and they leave? Well, I don't know if he was originally the one that said it, but I've heard Alan Kleinman say it a lot of times, is what if you don't train them and they stay? I think that's something that's really permeated with me is that, to me, when you train your staff, they actually make me look smarter. Does that make sense? But not only that, they also help to drive the better patient care. So one of the ways that I truly start with this and maintain the continuous improvement is, can you imagine, I'm sure you've read the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek, and where he starts with his, you have your concentric annular circles where you have the why in the center, you have the how in the second ring, and you have the what in the outer ring. And so when we teach staff, oftentimes, and actually early on in my career, I would teach them what to do. How do you do, what to do, how do you perform this procedure? What are the correct actions in order to be able to get the data or sell the product or whatever it is? But you don't ever get to the why of why we do that. It's not inspiring if we do that. To me, I've found that if I get with my team and explain the why, so the why for us is we strive to make people better versions of themselves. So that's what inspires us. So how do we do that? We do that by creating a well-trained and well-educated team. And then what? That makes us what's the number one in providing top patient care. And that really is reflected both in patient care and in our culture.
And it's funny, my father from a very young age, he impressed upon me when I was working in his office. He said, most of optometry, you as the doctor are going to be trapped in a 10 by 10 dark room with a patient. And what goes on outside your walls, you're going to have very little control over. So you better make sure that you know and trust what the people are doing out there because it's going to reflect upon you. So I'm kind of wondering, what do you do to try to sort of inspire the people who are out there when you're in with patients to make sure that everything's running efficiently?
Well, there's a few things that we do. One, we do quite a bit of team building. At the beginning of the year, I have a couple of sessions where with the staff, we actually do vision boards. I've taught my team how to do a vision board, whether it's just a word board or they're cutting out pictures out of magazines. It can be a personal, it can be a professional vision board. It's really whatever they want to do. Then I take me and my office manager or operations manager take each individual employee out to lunch. And we go over, I ask them to bring 3 personal and 3 professional things that they would like to accomplish for the year. Now, some of them don't want to bring personal things, and that's okay. But what I'm also looking for is what can I do to help you reach those goals? And I find that really when you're really working hard to help people reach their goals, and you're truly inspiring them to work towards your goals as well. And so I revisit that quarterly to make sure where we are in their goals, and we really work hard to make sure that we meet all of those objectives. Other than that, we have once a year, depends on where I am with my staff, but I've used the FISH principle. I don't know if you're familiar with the fish market at Pike's Place Fish Market in Seattle. I'm sure you are. Mm-hmm. The fish book, I use that, and basically I developed a 13-week program that basically takes all of those principles and teaches the staff how to be present, how to be engaged in everything that they do so that they can thrive. If somebody's talking to them, don't just keep typing at your computer. Turn and look at them and be present. You can choose your attitude. So what your attitude is affects your reaction to what your life is and what life hands you, and only you can choose that reaction. So leave your personal stuff at the door, but you know what? If you can't and it's overwhelming, then a teammate needs to look and see if you can make their day. So sometimes I even find that if energy is lacking or you're finding that yourself is not in a good mood, then oftentimes if you find a teammate or somebody or even a patient that needs a little helping hand or a word of support, then you can go and make their day, and that makes you feel better. And then also just finding ways to play at work that brings the energy to the office. It creates and sparks creative solutions. And we've also taken Danny Clark's Great Game of Business, and what that does is it basically teaches the staff how much money it actually costs to run an optometric practice. I think they think that, you gross 1.5 or more, you're taking home 1.3, right? Which we all know is not true. I wish, darn it. But we teach them really how much it costs to actually run the business. And he's got a great program that he puts on to teach optometric practices how to do that. But it really shows them and impacts them and teaches them how to make your practice more profitable. And when it's more profitable, then it actually benefits everyone. So it motivates everyone in order to be able to grow the practice, as well as make sure that the costs don't get out of control.
Right. So if you had any top tips for people who are, either opening cold, starting a new office, or expanding and need to staff up, what would those be?
I would say the first tip is to start with your core values. Develop those, and then guide your team to develop them, to quote unquote develop them themselves, right? I know what my core values are when I started, but I wanted to make sure that my team bought in. So you make it a team effort so that they can buy in. And then make every single decision that you make, whether it's dealing with an employee or a patient, reflect and support those core values. And then really just develop those training protocols. It can be very daunting, I know, to do that, depending on the size of practice, and especially for docs, if we're back in a dark room all day long, it's often difficult to do that. But I find that if you can actually utilize the team members that you have and the experience that you have, as long as you've transmitted your why we are doing this and have their buy-in, then they are going to be able to help develop those standards and protocols for you, whether it's a training manual or a doctor treatment protocol, or what do you do for a late patient, or what are their proficiency checklists? What should those look like? Your team members can help you develop those to where then it becomes more of like your Bible for training new employees.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the advice today. There's a lot for people to chew on here. And in fact, once this video is up, we'll put it on ODwire, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions for you as well. So hopefully we can keep the conversation going online.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to.